Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for a webinar on becoming a Chartered Environmentalist with CIEEM. The webinar is primarily aimed at full members of CIEEM, but anyone interested in the chartership journey is also very welcome. My name's Stuart Parks. I'm Head of Membership and Marketing at CIEEM. I'm joined today by Claire Smith, who is a Chartered Environmentalist and also one of our chartership assessors. Also joined by Phil Underwood, who is the Engagement Manager with the Society for the Environment. And Laura Wilson is here also as one of our membership officers at CIEEM. Laura's primary responsibility is to process applications for chartership and also to assist applicants. So today's webinar is being recorded, and since you've registered to join the webinar, a link to the recording will be sent to you later on. So what we're going to cover today. Firstly, I'm going to speak a little bit about CIEEM and what we do. Then Phil Underwood is going to talk to you about the Society for the Environment and what they do. Claire Smith is going to speak to us about what she's gained from having Chartered Environmentalist status and also her work as a chartership assessor. Laura will then talk to you about the application process. And then importantly, there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So please feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A function and we'll take a look at them. Please try to avoid using the chat function because it might mean that your questions get overlooked. So, CIEEM. CIEEM's the leading professional membership body representing and supporting ecologists and environmental managers in the UK, Ireland and abroad. And our vision is of a healthy natural environment for the benefit of current and future generations. CIEEM was formed in 1991 as the Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management and has grown into an increasingly influential professional body. Our leadership was recognised in 2013 when we were awarded a Royal Charter and became the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. And then we were further recognised for our contribution to the public good back in June 2020 when we were also registered as a charity in England and Wales. So what does CIEEM do? So we seek to set the industry standards of competence and conduct of those who practice the professions of ecology and environmental management. We promote the sharing of best practice through publications and we provide networking opportunities at a national, regional and special interest group level. As an institute, we support our members' continuing professional development through an extensive training and conference programme. And increasingly, we're being seen as an influential voice for the sector on policy and practice, and we advise the government on key issues concerning the environment. And importantly, we advocate an integrated interdisciplinary approach to sustainable management of the natural environment. But in terms of what we're talking about today, there are two routes to chartership with CIEEM. We run a Chartered Ecologist or CEcol, which is a register that's owned by CIEEM. And there's also Chartered Environmentalist, which we're focusing on today. So Chartered Environmentalist or CEnv is a register that's owned by the Society for the Environment, otherwise known as SocEnv. SocEnv is an umbrella organisation that licenses professional bodies to award the status of Chartered Environmentalist. We currently have 230 Chartered Ecologist registrants on this growing register, and we've got approximately 850 Chartered Environmentalist registrants at the moment. This webinar is one of a series of two, and the second will be covering becoming a Chartered Ecologist, and the details of this are available on our website. Now, the application process is the same for both chartership routes, but they look at different competency frameworks. So for Chartered Ecologist, we look at CIEEM's competency framework, and for Chartered Environmentalist, we use SocEnv's key competencies. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Phil, and he's going to tell you more about the Society for the Environment.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So Thank you very much for the introduction again. And good afternoon to those who are watching. It's very nice to be here with the opportunity to talk to you today. So as mentioned, my name is Phil and my details are on your screen at the moment. So I'm here to give a bit of an overview of who the Society for the Environment are, what links is to CIEEM, and why you might want to become a Chartered Environmentalist from a Society for the Environment point of view. So let's start with looking at who the Society for the Environment are. The sentence on your screen is a bit long, but essentially through Raw Charter, we exist to champion sustainability through environmental professionalism. To reword that a little bit, we essentially believe that proven, competent environmental professionals across all sectors are key to a sustainable future. So in the same way that a competent engineer is required to keep a bridge standing, a competent environmental professional is required to ensure sustainable biodiversity net gain, for example. So proven professionalism is the key element. Our core role is to register competent environmental professionals who have met and continue to meet a level of competence in their environmental work and their overall professionalism. There are currently over 7,500 registered environmental professionals, known as our registrants. And I hope that many of you watching today will be able to join them in the coming weeks or months or years. We do all of this in partnership with 24 professional bodies, and they're known as our member bodies or our licensed members when they get to that stage. So to extend on that last slide, there are 3 different professional registrations that we regulate: the Registered Environmental Technician, or REnTech, the Registered Environmental Practitioner, or REnP, and the Chartered Environmentalist, or CEnv. These registrations they're positioned in a progressional way. As an example, some will use REnP as a demonstration of a solid commitment to then be on the progressional ladder towards chartership. But today, I'm mainly going to be focusing on the CEnv register, and the reasons for that will become very clear in a couple of slides. But the title of the webinar might give it away as well. So these are the 24 professional bodies. These are key, essentially, to you becoming a registered environmental professional. To apply and continue as a registrant, you must be a member of one of these professional bodies, and you will apply for registration through that membership, not directly with SocEnv. So as a member of CIEEM, you can apply to become a Chartered Environmentalist, which is why we're here today, essentially. So this creates that principal link between SocEnv and CIEEM, really. And to clarify, all of the 24 professional bodies on your screen at the moment offer the Chartered Environmentalist registration to their competent members. So 10 of those 24 offer REnP registration as well, and you might notice there that that doesn't include CIEEM, and 5 offer the REnTech registration. And again, this isn't an option for CIEEM members, so hence why we're focusing on the Chartered Environmentalist registration today, but it just gives you a bit of an outline of how Society for the Environment works. So registering environmental professionals is essentially the core of what we do, but beyond SocEnv granted a license to CIEEM to award CEnv registration to their appropriately experienced and knowledgeable members, CIEEM are also members of SocEnv. We work in partnership to drive forward professional good practice and support each other's efforts to champion and develop professionals in that space. We both believe that professionals with proven, continuously developing competence are absolutely vital to a sustainable future. With these shared goals and many more, including policy and so on, we're extremely pleased to be working with CIEEM and their fantastic members for so many years so far, and going into the future. So that's a bit about how SocEnv links to CIEEM. Back to the registration and CEnv in particular. So in a few moments, as Stuart mentioned, Laura will be outlining how to become a chartered environmentalist with CIEEM and the requirements involved. But before then, I wanted to highlight some of the why. The key benefits that current chartered environmentalist registrants stated in our 2021 survey were increased credibility with clients and stakeholders, increased self-confidence, and increased career opportunity. The credibility theme pretty much always comes out on top in these surveys and is a massive benefit. With the CEnv letters after your name, you are instantly telling people that you have been externally verified as a highly knowledgeable professional when it comes to environmental good practice, leadership, and technical ability. You're also up to date through the CPD that you have completed and submitted to retain your CEnv status, which I imagine is very similar to the CEcol, the Chartered Ecologists. Influence is another big element that runs alongside credibility and confidence, and this is often noted in our registrant interviews that we do. They want more influence within business and project decisions, which chartership helps normally in bucket loads. Increasing amounts of employers are using chartership as a requirement for progression, and some offer financial incentives, which is also nice. So as an example of that, we know of large consultancy now that offer or require CEnv registration to sign off certain environmental reports. So it's an increasingly known mark of trust and responsibility. To add to that, in March, we will be launching our new website, and this will include a registrant directory where all registrants will be included. This will increase your visibility and helps you to verify your registration to employers and clients alike, really. We will also be launching our new Knowledge Hub. We want this to be the library of trusted thought pieces and good practice and guidance for environmental professionals, including signposting to items from CIEEM's news and blogs and publications, which Stuart mentioned briefly a moment ago. So this is a benefit for your learning, but it's also an opportunity for CIEEM registrants to contribute and showcase work and further the development of the wider environmental community, which is massive for us. So that's coming soon. But it's not just the individual that will benefit from CEnv registration. Employers benefit as well. And proven staff competence helps to win work. It improves their brand, and it demonstrates that their staff are working on projects that they're at the top of their game, essentially. Self-employed professionals are clearly seeing the benefits as well, in the same ways, really. But the fact that many employers value chartership so highly means that having it can only be a positive for progressing your career. Here's a few key stats that we've gained over the years. Fairly recently, the middle one's an interesting one. CEnv members within the IES, which is the Institution of Environmental Sciences, they found in their survey that CEnv members earn 33% more than non-CEnv members, which is always nice to know. And another one on there, which is pretty interesting, is that the average age of registrants is falling as new people come into the market through university and so on, but also transitioning over from other careers. So diving back into the CEnv registration itself with a few essentially quickfire FAQs based on things that could be seen as barriers to applying within or without a bit of an explanation. Can I become a CEnv whilst as a CEcol? So you're a chartered ecologist. Can I become a chartered environmentalist as well? Essentially, yes, you can. You're a highly competent ecologist, which is demonstrated by chartered ecology, which is absolutely the right thing to do. And this is not me saying you shouldn't do that, because that is your first port of call. But beyond that, your excellent ecological work, your wider environmental knowledge and experience, and the linkages between each element, from air pollution to forestry to urban design or net zero solutions, can be showcased with the Chartered Environmentalist registration. It's fair to say that I think the combination of becoming a chartered ecologist and the broader Chartered Environmentalist title is certainly a force to be reckoned with. How long does the application process take? Now that does depend to an extent. And I think Laura is likely to mention that later on in the webinar. Do I need to meet all of the CEnv competencies? Yes, you do. And again, Laura will be talking about them soon. And do you have to have a master's degree to be a chartered environmentalist? No, you don't. So if you're worried about that, because you do have to have master's level knowledge, but you don't have to have a master's degree. So that's worth bearing in mind. So hopefully that encourages you to keep listening, essentially. Clearly, you might have some other questions beyond the FAQ, and we're looking forward to answering those at the end of the webinar. So I mentioned earlier about contributing to our knowledge hub in the future, but we have been amplifying voices of environmental professionals for many years now through providing speaker opportunities, to continuously raising the profile of professionals in this space, and to give you added exposure, essentially. We want to really champion what environmental professionals do and the impact that you have. If you have a project in mind, for example, that could benefit from a group of environmental professional volunteers from different sectors to drive a concept forward, we can make those kind of things happen. Most recently, as an example, we've done this with the Pledge Net Zero and the Swords and Stones program that we've had to very good effect. So bringing those environmental professionals together is core to what we do, really. Through our annual awards as well, we also highlight those who have really stood out with their outstanding work. The 2022 SocEnv Awards will be opening relatively soon, and we award the Environmental Professional of the Year and the Registrant Newcomer of the Year awards. So next year, it is certainly within scope that you might be able to be in contention for the latter, the Registrant Newcomer of the Year. So keep that in mind. So the last few bits from me, really. Now, given that you're probably potentially a member of CIEEM already, or plan to be soon, you have an interest and a degree of knowledge when it comes to the impacts, or the positive impacts of ecology and environmental management. So I'm not going to focus on looking into the impacts of your sector, but it's the question at the foot of the screen that is most interesting. Who makes the ecological and environmental decisions? And beyond that, who makes the environmental decisions across all sectors and disciplines? So say you're a chartered environmentalist via CIEEM, you have a high level of environmental competence. This puts you on par with nearly 8,000 chartered environmentalists with a vast range, or from a vast range of sectors and roles, and they're across the world. They're all making evidence-based decisions with proven competence and professionalism. If you become a chartered environmentalist, you'll be a part of that global community of professionals who have committed to use their expertise to address environmental challenges and progress opportunities. The CEnv registration brings you together, and we think that's hugely important to creating a more sustainable world. And that links quite nicely back to the purpose of SocEnv, and you've seen this slide already at the very start. Essentially, you can lead the way and demonstrate that proven expertise is key for a better future. And this is my last slide. Back in 2020, which I can't believe it was 2 years ago now, chartered environmentalists, the community surrounding that came together to tell the world about the vital work that they do via CEnv. It included some brilliant highlights and inspiration from chartered environmentalists from across all sorts of different sectors and disciplines and experience levels. And when I say experience levels, it's worth remembering that you don't need to be a director or a CEO to be a chartered environmentalist. That's not what it's all about. So if you want to find out a bit more from chartered environmentalists themselves, and we're going to hear from a chartered environmentalist very, very soon, but if you search for the hashtag #IamCEnv on Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you'll find some good video clips, interviews, webinars, and some good wise words of advice. So that's essentially it from me for now. Thank you very much for sticking with me. And I'm going to hand back to Laura, I think.
In fact, Phil, thank you very much. You're going to hand back to me.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for putting that important context to the presentation today. It's good to see that bigger picture. In fact, that that people that consider becoming chartered environmentalists and then succeed in doing so, become a key part of and join that community. So that's really useful. So what we'll do now is get stuck into a bit more of the detail, but we'll also first of all, I'm going to pass you over to Claire Smith. She is a very experienced chartered environmentalist and is also one of our chartership assessors. So if that's okay with you, Claire, hopefully you're able for me to hand over to you.
Thank you, Stuart. I think you're just going to share the slides.
Oh yeah, I better do, hadn't I? Can you see what you need now?
I think you might just need to move it on.
There we go.
That's it. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you found it useful so far. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a quick snapshot into my personal view and experience to date. So essentially, why did I personally apply for CEnv status? There were a few reasons. Some of the key ones are just shown on the slide in front of you there. But to start with, it's to demonstrate my depth and breadth of knowledge and expertise within that wider context, not just focused on ecology. I should possibly also add, I do hold both CEcol and CEnv, but focusing today on the CEnv side of things. So through that, demonstrating that knowledge in both the written, but also in the verbal form, and that's through the written application and then subsequently through the in my day it was the face-to-face, but I know more recently it's actually the virtual interview part of the application. And then linking with that really is I wanted to be recognised, in turn demonstrate through my written and interview process that I I continue to do so and uphold the highest possible standards within the sector. Equally, on a personal level, but also to demonstrate to others, is my personal commitment to both the profession, but equally that wider environmental sector. And also part of the application is touched on previously is just around to show the commitment I personally make to my continued learning and development. And also that does not stop once you have applied and successfully obtained your chartership. It's, it goes without saying. And then finally is actually to essentially supplement my networking with others, both within the CEnv family, but also wider across all sector and all work that I currently do. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as mentioned, I am one of the many CEnv assessors. So, for me, why did I volunteer to be one? In a nutshell, again, number of reasons, some key ones there shown on the slide, but first and paramount really is that this is a different and certainly interesting role to that of my everyday responsibilities for my employer. So it certainly gives me that variety in the work that I do. On a personal level, I wanted to give something back and make my own small but hopefully valuable contribution to the profession. And then linking to that really is, as touched on previously, is because it's a much wider scope across the environment sector, there is the opportunity to gain insight and knowledge across a wide range of environmental disciplines. Equally, in my own but small way, is making a contribution towards the continuation of upholding high professional standards for those who are joining the CEnv family. And then finally, meeting new people, and this not only applies to the fellow assessors, as in when we get together for the interviews, but equally the actual applicants themselves. So all in all, a positive experience from my perspective in being a volunteer assessor. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Blair, thank you so much. That's again really a very useful insight into why you became a registrant and continue to be one. So, thank you again for the role you play as a volunteer assessor. As you know, we couldn't have any body with chartership without volunteers like yourself. So that's very, very useful. Laura, I'm going to hand over to you to talk in a bit more detail about the process now, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Okay, lovely. So firstly, who can apply? So in order to apply for CN status with CIEEM, you must fulfill the following requirements. So be a full or fellow member of CIEEM, be able to evidence the required level of knowledge and experience in your written application and at a professional review interview, demonstrate knowledge of, competence in and engagement with sustainable management, and agree to comply with the Society for the Environment's Code of Conduct, as well as CIEEM's Code of Professional Conduct and continuing professional development requirements. So there are two stages to a chartership application, the written report stage and the professional review interview, or PRI. So for stage one, the written report stage, you will need to identify the best examples of your work to demonstrate your competence, as these will be assessed against the Society for the Environment's key competencies. There are 12 competencies grouped under 4 themes. The key competencies document is available through a link on the Chartered Environmentalist web page of our website or on SocEnv's website. For each competency, you will need to provide relevant evidence using a maximum of 350 words. There is lots of information in the guidance about how to best present your evidence along the lines of being sure to use first person, making full use of the word count, taking care in the selection of your examples by identifying specific projects and experience that best demonstrate the key competencies. The personal statement is up to 500 words. CPD, the Secretariat verifies that your CPD meets CIEEM's requirements, but the assessors also use it to gain an insight into you as a person. So just a little bit about sponsors. Sponsors play a critical role, and so we would encourage you to involve them as early as possible in the process. You will need 2 sponsors who must confirm that the information contained in your application form about your competence and professionalism is correct. To do this, they must have sufficient knowledge of the quality of your practice as a professional. Your sponsors should ideally be members of CIEEM and also at the same grade that you are applying for or above, and of course be able to endorse the evidence. We understand that people who may be most suitable to act as sponsors may not be CIEEM members, and so we therefore do accept non-member sponsors, but we will require you to send in a copy of their CV so that we can verify their suitability to endorse your application. Choosing people who know your work well and can help you identify the evidence in your application will help to strengthen your submission. Sponsors are requested to write an endorsement of approximately 200 words, and there is a separate guidance document which is sent to applicants to be forwarded to sponsors. So once you have submitted the report, it is then reviewed by 3 assessors and applicants receive their outcome with feedback. There are 3 possible outcomes at this stage. You may have sufficiently evidenced all your competencies, in which case, congratulations, you are through to the professional review interview, and you will receive your outcome with feedback and further guidance, which will assist you in preparing for your interview. If you have 1 or 2 competencies that were insufficiently evidenced, you will be invited to resubmit these, taking on board the assessor feedback. This resubmission will have to be assessed as sufficiently evidenced in order for you to proceed to the interview stage. If you are unsuccessful in 3 or more competencies, then you will be informed and given your feedback in order to assist you with any future application. As a relatively recent change to the application process, any competencies judged to have been sufficiently evidenced at stage 1 will be kept with your membership record, and can be carried forwards to any future CEnv application without the need to provide further written evidence at stage 1. This change will lessen the work for repeat applications, but it should be borne in mind that applicants must be able to fully evidence all claimed competencies at stage 2 of their application regardless. When you are successfully through to stage 2, the professional review interview stage, or PRI, you will receive the following in terms of support. All the feedback from stage 1 and any resubmissions you may have had, further guidance to help you prepare for your interview. Depending on the number of applicants, there will either be a webinar to test the technology or an individual Zoom call. And either way, you will have the opportunity to ask any questions you may have about the interview stage and run through a quick checklist. Just to let you know, we endeavour to arrange interviews for the convenience of both applicants and assessors, and we do our very best to work around everyone's requirements. After the interview has taken place, it takes approximately 2 weeks for the Secretariat to process the outcome and inform applicants. So that's it for the process. I'm now handing back to Stuart, who will tell you a bit more about the support available.
Laura, thank you very much. Thank you for taking us through the process. So a quick word on where you can look to find support. So guidance documents, there's some guidance documents that we've written to help you. Please take the time to read them and read them fully. They contain lots of advice on the best ways to present your evidence, which is obviously very key to a successful application. We've also got a mentoring platform that's open to CIEEM members, and that's a place where members can share their knowledge and their skills and experience and ultimately support one another with their professional and personal development. And it's quite common for potential applicants to seek the support of mentors through the platform. Of course, importantly, the feedback. So you'll be receiving feedback as an applicant from the assessors that have reviewed your stage 1, your written application. And that's very important in terms of helping you prepare for stage 2, your professional review interview. Or if it's been an unsuccessful application on that occasion, it can provide, of course, a very clear indication of areas where you might look to improve a forthcoming application in order to achieve the status that you're seeking at some point in the future. Obviously, but importantly, your colleagues. Colleagues that have been through the process before you will doubtless be able to offer their advice and their insight about their experience. And as Laura mentioned previously, sponsors are really key. We do encourage you to identify those early and make good use of them and use their advice and guidance. And there's us, of course, at CIEEM. We're always here to answer any queries or questions that you might have. So the thing to do if you're interested in applying for Chartered Environmentalist through CIEEM would be to contact us to request an application form and that guidance document. So there's an application form request form on the Chartered Environmentalist page of the website, or you can just contact us directly. You can either give us a ring or you can email membership@ciem.net. And Laura will send you an application form and a guidance document in its latest format. I say that because you should note that, as Laura mentioned just a minute ago, we've changed the process quite recently, and the forms and the guidance are occasionally subject to change. So if you do request a form and then for whatever reason you're not able to use it fairly promptly, we would always advise you just to get back in touch and make sure you're using the most up-to-date version of both the form and the guidance documents before you go about submitting an application. So that's the presentation part of the webinar complete now, and I think we should move on to the question and answer session. Hopefully Christy will be able to tell us whether or not we've had any questions in. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and you can see each of us and fire away, hopefully. Christy, have you got some questions for us?
Hello, yes, a couple of questions have come in. So is it better to gain CIEEM before trying to go for CEnv? And they are a consultant ecologist.
Is it better to gain CIEEM before going for CEnv? Claire's probably got an opinion on that, but I would start by saying that they are of course different, and the processes are different. So I don't know that I would suggest that that there's any sensible order to try to achieve them in, you need to go through similar processes, just using different competency frameworks. So perhaps doing one or the other might prepare you for then doing the second to a degree, but the frameworks are quite different. So the degree to which doing one or the other might serve as preparation, I think probably would be reasonably limited. So I guess the short way of answering that would be, I don't think so. But Claire, have you got anything that you might add as an insight?
Not really. I think you've covered that completely right. In terms of, for me personally, I do hold both. But for me, my CE call was not around when I applied. So my first application was through CEnv for the reasons covered in the webinar. And then when the CE call came around, because of my technical background equally being ecology, I felt similar reasons for why I wanted to go for the CE call. I am fortunate because I'm able to hold both and continue demonstrating the requirements for both. But as you said, Stuart, really it does depend on where you see yourself as your role as to whether it's more applicable, because you are, for both or for either, you need to demonstrate the competencies. So for CE Col, it's obviously ecologically focused. As CEnv, you're covering that broader range. So I would advise looking at both and doing a realistic review of those competencies to make sure that you're applying for the most appropriate and able to demonstrate.
And to be honest, I guess if anything, go for the one that you feel most confident in first, because you can always take that confidence forward to a subsequent application for the other. Christy, what's next?
Great, thanks both. A couple of questions from Naomi. Does your sponsor need to be chartered, and can your sponsors be from the same company?
Laura, is that something you're happy to pick up?
Yes, I can take that one. So the sponsors can be from the same company, but it's best if, you know, one that you work closely with and another one should ideally be from another part of the company. And as far as the chartership, I mean, it is important that the person sponsoring you is of a suitable level to be able to sponsor you. So that would be my thoughts on that, Stuart. I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I guess they don't have to be chartered, Laura, but they need to be credible as a sponsor. So that's why we ask that they're working at least the level that you're seeking. So they should be at ideally working at least chartership level. And if they're not a CIEEM member, that's one of the reasons why we ask for a CV to be submitted also, just so that we can check that actually they're able to competently assess your application and endorse your claim of competence. So hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you both. Question from Jennifer. Are there any worked examples to show for stage 1?
Worked examples of submissions. Do you know, we did have some of those in the past, actually. So, and I know we have some for Chartered Ecologist. Do they exist at present, Laura, for Chartered Environmentalist, or is that something that we could look to create and make available?
Yes, I think that's something we would look to do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so actually we could put that on our list and have some of those ready relatively soon, because that's a good shout. That would be a useful resource to add to the append to the guidance and also add to the web page, I'd suggest. So thank you for that question.
Brilliant, thank you. Caroline asks, can you say more about the professional review interview and what is involved?
Yes, we can. The professional review interview is it's a really important part of the process, actually, and I might give Claire an early nod as she conducts them, of course, and I don't, but it's a really important part of the process. So as Laura mentioned in her slide, we will do some preparation with you first. So each applicant that gets that far will do a test Zoom call, because we do them all through video conference now, unless there's some reason why that would disadvantage a particular applicant, and then we can arrange for a face-to-face, but typically through this medium that we're also familiar with now. And they take in the region of probably 45 minutes or so, sometimes a tiny bit longer. And that's an opportunity for the assessors to inquire in more detail about the information that you've put and the examples that you've put at stage 1 on your written application, but also to look at some of those different aspects of being someone that holds chartership. So for both chartered ecologist and chartered environmentalist, those aspects of you as an individual where they might be looking for how you act as a role model and as a bit of a kind of a leader and lead by example. So it's that extra bit that maybe doesn't come through as readily on paper that they're looking to test at interview. But Claire, what's your thoughts on the PRI process?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is some reassurance that by no means is it designed to trip you up. Essentially, it is, as Stuart's just outlined there, it's the opportunity for you as the applicant to elaborate, explain, talk through your application. And we as assessors, we're not scary, hopefully we're not scary anyway, but we try to make it as well as we can within this obviously virtual environment to be that discussion opportunity, to provide the forum for the applicant to present themselves, answer questions. As I say, they haven't been designed to trip anybody up or catch anybody out. It is purely that opportunity to just go through the application, unpick anything if through that assessment process that the assessors may have had, that just want to, as I say, open up the opportunity for that discussion to take place and look at the depth, breadth, talking through with the applicant to show how, you know, they are demonstrating their role model application.
Thank you, Claire. That's a really useful addition, actually. And I should say very quickly, I would just add that, for example, as Laura mentioned, the stage 1 process has word limits necessarily. So quite often what the assessors are looking to do is say, this looks great, what you've put on paper, but can you give me some more examples of how you've done it? Let's explore that breadth of competence. And the other thing that I would mention is that we get lots of feedback from both applicants and assessors, actually, that they actually find the process by and large quite enjoyable. And I always like to remind applicants that the assessors are volunteers. So what you're, in essence, if you go into it thinking, actually, 2 of my potential peers, 2 experienced people are giving up their time to listen to me talk about my career and my experience, they clearly want you to succeed. And there's nothing there to trip you up. And most people do find it, once they've settled in, a pleasant experience by and large. So hopefully that's answered the question. Christy?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So I think this is a question for Stu and Laura. What are the benefits of achieving CEnv with CIEEM as opposed to other registered organisations?
As opposed to other licensed bodies, I'm assuming that means. In terms of achieving it through CIEEM, well, obviously, hopefully, you'll be a CIEEM member. But if you're a member of another licensed body, you're perfectly within your rights to apply for Chartered Environmentalist status through the other licensed body and achieve it and display it that way. The processes are not necessarily all the same depending on licensed body. So each licensed body can adopt its own process for achieving Chartered Environmentalist. It's important at that stage, I guess, to say that each licensed body of the 24 that Phil mentioned earlier on is regularly assessed by SocEnv to make sure that the license can be awarded and re-awarded. So the processes are very rigorously audited by SocEnv to make sure that they all kind of stand up against each other and are suitably rigorous, and the standard is maintained. I guess in terms of achieving it through CIEEM, there might be a couple of advantages, particularly if you've gone through the competence assessment process to become a full member and therefore be eligible, or if you're also considering chartered ecologist. It's that the processes are very similar, and that's a relatively recent change. They weren't similar for quite some time, but we've aligned both processes now for chartership so that there's a degree of familiarity for you as an applicant which hopefully to a degree increases your confidence and reduces your workload a bit, but also it allows us to be a lot happier about how rigorously we can audit the performance of our assessors. He says, looking at Claire on the screen, but how we can audit the performance of our assessors and make sure that the standard is maintained and that everyone is treated fairly. I'm not for a minute suggesting that other bodies don't do that, because I don't know their processes, but I'm very comfortable with the changes that we've made to ours from that regard. So Laura, have you got anything else to add in terms of an advantage there?
No, I think you covered everything there. Thank you, Stuart.
Okay. If I haven't quite got that question, you know, what you were trying to get at from that question, do pop something back in or drop us an email separately to make sure that we cover that.
Great, thank you, Stu. So another question here. I'm at the start of my career. How long does the journey to chartership take?
That's an interesting one. Phil might have something to say on that as well, but from a CIEEM perspective, currently you need to be a full member of the institute to be eligible to apply, and that's partly because full member status of CIEEM, if I refer back to Phil's earlier slides, is at least equivalent to a master's level knowledge, which is SocEnv's minimum requirement for you to be able to be eligible to apply. So typically, to become a full member of CIEEM and therefore to be eligible to apply for either Chartered Environmentalist or Chartered Ecologist, it would take in the region of, I hesitate, we don't like putting numbers of years on because people think that that's an eligibility requirement, and it's not. It's based on an assessment of competence to the required standard. But we find on average people take anywhere in the region of 5 to 7 years to have acquired enough competence in a broad enough range of areas to at least be able to apply for full membership successfully. So you'd be looking at a kind of that sort of ballpark to then progress on towards chartership applications. I would say on average, our chartered registrants that are successful, those successful applicants, have somewhere in the region of anywhere between 8 and 10 years experience as a minimum. Partly because chartership requires a greater breadth of experience and typically a greater complexity of project that you're working on regularly to be able to justify those claims of competence. So unless Claire's got anything to add, or if Phil wants to add anything in terms of what that looks like from other licensed bodies other than CIEEM, I'll leave it to those guys. But that would be what I'd say from a CIEEM perspective.
From a SocEnv perspective, I agree with everything you said there, Stuart. The master's level is very key, and some people get to that master's level of knowledge quicker than others, depending on their career routes, and some will already have a master's degree, for example. But it's worth noting that if you have a master's degree, that doesn't mean you necessarily immediately meet all of the competencies. There's different elements to that, and how it, in terms of how it differs to other licensed members, so you have to reach you have to be at a certain level of membership within that professional body, and sometimes it can take longer to get to that level of membership within the professional body, for example. So within a couple of the engineering bodies, you have to have a master's and you have to have a certain number of years to get to their membership level before you could even start to apply for Chartered Environmentalist, for example. So it does vary in that way. A guide that we have, which is very much a general guide, is you would generally have to have at least 4 years of experience of working, but that is at least, and it does vary. So it depends on your career journey, but yeah, hope that helps.
That's great, thank you. Anything else to add from anyone? No? Okay. Next question then from Graham. I am 72 years old and I have retired from paid employment, although still very active in environmental matters, including through the CIEEM Scottish Policy Group. Is it a silly idea for me to consider going for CEnv status?
I don't know that I would say that it's a silly idea at all. Claire, I'm wondering if you think you might have something to add on how useful the questioner might find it, though, and what they might gain at that stage of their career.
I can try. Yeah, so I think I agree. I don't think it's a silly idea, but you do have to think, you know, why go through that process. And, you know, I think from the experience in the current support that you're doing through the CIEEM working group, it certainly, you know, demonstrates that commitment to the profession. But whether, I mean, I would always say, yes, go for it. But, you know, it's entirely up to you whether you feel that by having that CEM status, you know, what would it add for you in terms of continuing your contribution to the profession and the wider sector? Maybe CE, Cole.
Well, I mean, I guess the other thing, thank you, Claire. I mean, I guess the other thing to consider is, in order to be able to retain chartered status, there's still a commitment to CPD. And that might be something that you don't want to have to commit to and put yourself through once you've, you know, clocked up a number of years as a professional and have now decided, actually, you know, I'm thinking maybe I'm more of a retired professional. So I think probably the important thing is, clearly, if you're considering it, you feel you've still, quite rightly, I'm sure, got something to offer, and perhaps there might be other ways about through which you can still offer that kind of experience that you've amassed. So perhaps consider becoming, for example, if you are a CIEEM member, becoming a mentor on the CIEEM mentoring platform, or playing a more active role in your local member network, and networking with younger professionals in your area, and giving the, you know, the advantage and the benefit of your experience. So I'd think about what you want to gain from it, and also what you think the real motivator is for you to be considering it, and whether there are other more straightforward ways. But I don't want to dissuade you from that necessarily. So that would probably be my comment on that.
That's great, thank you. Question here from Jill: do we provide an existing report we've authored and then write evidence separately to demonstrate the competencies?
That's a good question. There's not a report stage through the CIEEM application process any longer. So all of the application process through CIEEM for Chartered Environmentalist is based on evidence of competence. So you'll be looking at each of the SocEnv key competencies, and then within the word count for each of those, providing examples of your work. So I guess in essence, you might be kind of the report stage that was something that was part of the previous application process is kind of being dismantled and expanded upon and slotted into the evidence boxes. If you're thinking about a kind of professionally produced report as some part of your work, there's no need to provide that as part of an application in terms of any kind of portfolio, if that's the way the question's going.
Great,
hopefully I've covered both bases there with any luck.
That's great, thank you. Question from Naomi: if you have gaps in your previous 3 years CPD record, i.e. CIEEM abeyance during maternity leave, can the 3-year period cover a longer time span?
I think that would be fine. The important bit about CPD, though, is the degree to which it's relevant. So if the time span is much longer, and therefore the most or the majority of the CPD you're able to evidence was arguably some considerable time ago, then it doesn't necessarily demonstrate as readily current relevance. So importantly for us, it's as current as possible. It is to a degree an eligibility requirement to have 3 years worth, but we are aware of people's circumstances and how they change, so we can have some flexibility around that. But I would also be bearing in mind, if, for example, you've had a period away from the profession and then you're coming back to it, the timing of your Chartered Environmentalist application. So I wouldn't be dissuading you from doing it, but knowing that stage 2 is thinking about being able to provide some more relatively recent and relevant examples at interview, you might decide, well, it might be better for me to delay this a little while to get a little bit more current CPD under my belt, partly to help me in terms of providing the examples that I'm going to need to provide at the interview stage. So I think I might have answered that by saying maybe, which is rather unfortunate, but we won't stick hard and fast to it as an eligibility requirement, but I'd think about how well it helps you to prepare for the application process. Has anyone else got anything that they might want to add in on that point? Okay, looks like that's the answer.
Great, thank you very much. Question here, are there any in-person sessions for international applicants, or are the interactions online only?
In-person sessions for international applicants. In terms of, I'm assuming they're meaning the professional review interview there. Can the interview be held face-to-face? I'm guessing, because that's really the kind of interactive part of the process. By and large, no. We have switched to video conferencing as the interview methodology prior to COVID and everything else, partly because of or largely because of the carbon impact of getting interviewers and applicants all traveling to a particular location to meet face to face, partly also because it helps us to keep the cost of the application process down for you as an applicant. I will say that if for some reason somebody feels they might be disadvantaged through trying to use this kind of technology, that we would definitely look at being able to provide a face-to-face opportunity. But I guess the limitation there is where the volunteer assessors are located. So because we're a professional body that's predominantly based in UK and Ireland, I'm comfortable that we could find opportunities for face-to-face interviews in UK and in the island of Ireland. But beyond that, we would be very limited in terms of our ability to be able to do that, because it's based on where people like Claire are available as volunteer assessors. So I think UK and Ireland, which is our area of business predominantly, we could make something happen if we needed to, but typically no, it's through this medium. But I would say to, Christy, to that person and to the previous questioner regarding, CPD and periods of maternity leave or parental leave or whatever, please just drop us a mail to talk through in more detail your particular circumstances, because we'll do whatever we can to accommodate what we need to. So do get in touch. That's the important takeaway.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate we're coming towards the end. We're a minute away from 1 PM. We've still got a few questions. Did you want me to carry on?
If it suits you, Christy, I know that the webinar platform only gives us a certain window, but we're okay for a minute if it suits you.
Yes, yeah, happy to. Just let everybody know we are recording, so if you do need to leave, you can rewatch later on. So a question here from Jill. Once you have one of the charterships, is it simpler to gain the second?
I think I'd probably refer back to my answer to that previous question in terms of which order should you get them in. Probably, if anything, just in terms of familiarity with the process. But the requirements are, although the process is the same, I'll reiterate that the competency frameworks that the processes rest upon are very different. So perhaps you might find it slightly easier to get one over the other if your career has taken you down a particular route and you see yourself very much working in ecology or very much a kind of broader environmental background. That might be the only thing that might indicate that you might find one more straightforward than another. But I don't know that one's necessarily easier to attain in terms of process. Anyone got anything else to add on that?
I'd probably just agree with that entirely. So it's different focus. There's still a requirement to submit evidence to support and demonstrate your depth, breadth, knowledge on the respective competency that you're claiming for. So it by no means, if you go through CEnv first and you're successful in that, it's not an automatic okay, that's fine, you can now have CE card. There's still a process to follow, and there's still the evidence that you need to demonstrate.
Great, thank you so much. Question here from Damien. If you are an associate member but have met the requirements for both full membership and chartership, is it possible to fast track to chartership or submit applications for both together?
We wouldn't expect you to submit an application for full membership and then chartership. You could, if you wanted to, go straight for chartership, but it's a significant step to do that. So I would encourage most people, and I guess particularly from my perspective, most people thinking about chartered ecologist, because the process of achieving full membership uses the same framework as chartered ecologist, that it might be useful to go through that full membership process first, because then you'll get feedback on a range of competencies that you won't then need to evidence again to get to chartered ecologist status. You'd just be looking at evidencing the remaining additional competencies that you would need. For chartered environmentalists, the frameworks are different. So if you were to go for chartered environmentalist, you would need to gain full CIEEM membership first to be eligible to go for chartered environmentalist. So a slightly different answer depending on which chartership there. Did I explain that clearly, Laura? I think I did. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm not quite sure what this question relates to. And the person is anonymous, but it says, is the report the competency form that we need to populate for this? Does that make sense?
Okay, I mean, there used to be, in our process at least, the application process required somebody to submit a fairly lengthy written report which related to the SocEnv competencies throughout it, and then have an interview. But as I think I mentioned earlier, what we've done now is we focus on specific evidence of competence for each of those SocEnv key competencies, but without the need for that written report. So it enables you, I guess, to make sure that you're very clearly demonstrating the evidence for each of the competencies. And that makes it a lot clearer for the people assessing to be able to see that evidence pertains to and clearly demonstrates the level of competence that specific one of the 12 competencies is looking for. So the report, unless somebody's perhaps looking at an old version of an application form or an old version of the guidance, that's not the process any longer. So I'd say get in touch. Laura, you're going to add?
Sorry, I was just going to add, I think possibly the confusion has come because I called the stage one the report stage, but it is the form with the competencies that I was referring to there.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So possibly a bit of confusion around terminology, but the important bit is get in touch with Laura, get the latest form and the latest guidance, and it should be very clear.
Great. Thank you so much. Question from Luke. Are there specific times of the year that applications are accepted and interviews conducted, or can applications be submitted at any time of the year?
I think I can answer that one. Yes, we are taking we used to have application deadlines, but we now take applications throughout the year. And so whenever you would like to apply, and we've done that, so it spreads the work for applicants across the year, and you can apply at a time that is convenient to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. So yeah, a couple of questions left. One from Caroline. Can you have more than 2 sponsors? As a freelance ecologist, I work with many other ecologists, but often on specific areas of expertise. So finding 2 sponsors at full CIEEM level that can cover all competencies might be difficult.
Thanks for the question. And yeah, we completely understand that. So yes, you can. particularly, I'll just reiterate that ideally they need to be CIEEM members at the equivalent level, but they don't have to be CIEEM members, because we don't want that to be a barrier to somebody applying. They just need to be credible as a sponsor. And we're very aware that people's careers can vary quite a lot, and it might be that particular pieces of evidence might relate to a project that maybe you're working alongside somebody that you don't work alongside any longer. So we can accept more than 2 sponsors where they're required to specifically endorse particular pieces of evidence. So we're very flexible about that. All we ask usually is that you just give Laura a heads up as part of the application process. Because we need to just verify that the sponsors are happy to act in that capacity for you. So, but yes, that's fine by me. Laura, you're not shaking your head, so I'm assuming I've got that right, and it's fine by you too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff.
Great, thank you. I think you've kind of answered the last question. Freelance ecologist, therefore, has less support in terms of working with people that have chartered status. How easy is it to become chartered? But yeah, I think you've covered that.
Yeah, well, partly. I mean, it's finding somebody that's at an appropriate level. It may be that they're at an appropriate level, but they simply haven't undergone or gone through the process of becoming chartered themselves. And I'll add yet to the end of that, because I hope you'd encourage them to do so. If you felt they were suitable to be a sponsor, then why aren't they at chartered status? So it's possible. You may need to delve back a bit into places that you've worked and other people that you've worked alongside, or, for example, looking at the people that have commissioned you to undertake some work. So as a freelance ecologist, who are you working on behalf of, and as somebody there eligible that's maybe subcontracted you to be able to endorse the quality of that work that you're using as your evidence. But I would say again, if you've got those issues, get in touch. We really don't want there to be any obstacles to the application process. So we will work with you as much as possible to be able to allow that to happen. So there shouldn't be any reason why somebody can't apply if they have a sufficient amount of evidence across the required breadth and depth of competencies, and we'll do what we can to make that happen. Anyone else got anything else to add? Or I'm guessing if that was the last question, any final words from any of you guys?
I would just like to raise, I didn't mention it in my presentation about the length of time it takes to process applications. So generally it's about 4 months for both stages. So stage 1 could be about 2 months, and stage 2, 2 months. But it does depend, because our assessors are volunteers, and it depends on a lot of variables, but that's roughly speaking how long you would expect it to kind of take. But I do keep everybody completely updated throughout the entire process about where we are, and if there's going to be a delay or anything like that for any reason. So
thank you, Laura. That's a useful addition, and that works for both CEcol and CEnv by and large. And it's, yes, I mean, there's a number of administrative checks we need to do to make sure we've got everything. I insist on making sure that we audit the process, so that we make sure that everyone's being treated fairly. So that's a big part of Laura's job, to make sure everything's in place. Then we need to identify the volunteers. I guess the only time that the timescale might change a little is if you happen to submit your application at a time of year when you're about to become very busy as a professional, because it means that it's very likely that the volunteer assessors, such as Claire, are also going to be very busy, because they're doing the same kind of work as you. So that's the only thing I'd bear in mind is potentially, if you're not as busy, it's likely that the volunteer assessors will have a bit more capacity than they might do at other times of year. It's probably the fairest way to say that. So any final words before we let everyone go and have some lunch and wrap up?
Nothing specifically, apart from wishing everyone luck with their applications. Claire,
anything from you?
Yeah, just to say thanks for everyone for attending, and look forward to seeing hopefully some of you in an interview.
Thank you. And I'd like to say again, very much thank you, Phil, for joining us and for giving us that useful insight into SocEnv and what CEnv is all about, because that's something clearly that we couldn't do. And thank you, Claire, for volunteering yet more of your time to assist people in understanding the process. And hopefully, everyone, you found it useful. We've been able to answer your questions. Thank you, Christy, for your support, and Laura for your work in pulling all of that information together. By all means, guys, if we've not answered anything, do get in touch. Do membership@CIEEM.net. Get in touch with Laura, and we'll do our best to answer those questions very promptly. So apart from that, thank you very much indeed. I'll hand back to you, Christy, to close the webinar.
Yeah, no, I think you've closed it, Stu. Thank you very much. Yeah, so like we said, we'll send out the recording later this afternoon so you can rewatch this if you'd like to. And yeah, a massive thank you to everybody today for joining us.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.